Why is the Omicron COVID variant so scary? COVID-19 has ravaged the planet for quite some time now and completely changed many people's way of life. First recognized as a disease of international concern on January 30th of 2020, and then later declared a pandemic on March 11th of 2020, it's hard to believe that we have been living under this pandemic for almost 2 full years. During that time, it's estimated that over 261 million people in the world have contracted the virus, and a staggering 5.2 million have lost their lives from it. It's also estimated that in 2020 alone, 225 million jobs were lost worldwide, with the pandemic having an adverse effect on businesses and the economy. With all of this out there, it's fair to say that COVID-19 has been one of the hardest times for humans in decades. Now, the bright side about all of this is that COVID-19 is in the back half of its career as a pandemic, and it's on its way out. Or at least, that's what most of us thought. As governments began rolling out the vaccines, optimism began to increase worldwide. The numbers of cases in countries where vaccines were being administered started to dip, and it looked like we were finally exiting this horrible disease. COVID-19 is a tough customer though, and some unforeseen variants have done their part in halting this process. It started with the Delta variant. More contagious and more deadly than the initial COVID virus, the Delta variant started sweeping through the planet, and although it didn't make vaccines obsolete by any means, it certainly did make them less successful. We met this challenge head on though, and after an initial spike in numbers have slowly started to bring the cases down. However, COVID wasn't finished, and it has now come out with what people believe to be the scariest COVID variant yet: Omicron. Where did Omicron come from? How contagious and deadly is this variant compared to the others? And what can we do to stop Omicron from once again ravaging the planet? These are all the things that we'll be covering in this video. So without further ado, it's time to take a look at why the Omicron variant is so scary. First off, the name Omicron originates from the Greek alphabet, which holds the same theme as the other names that the World Health Organization has given to the virus. Omicron was discovered earlier this month, and its first sighting was in Botswana in southern Africa. The World Health Organization is so far pretty worried about this variant, as they've labeled it as a variant of concern. The reason why people are worried about this variant, and more so than other variants in the past, is because of just how many mutations this variant reportedly carries with it. I'm going to quote an article here written by Amit Chakravarty discussing the dangers of these mutations. He writes, according to health experts based in the UK, cited by Daily Mail, 2 of these mutations, R203K and G204R, help the virus replicate faster. 3 of these mutations, H655Y, N679K, and P681H, help it to sneak into the body cells more easily, they said. The presence of the last 2 mutations together, a rare occurrence, also indicate Omicron is more resistant to vaccines. Basically folks, these mutations make it so that the vaccines that we've all been receiving no longer recognize the virus. This all has to do with the spike protein that's on the virus. The current vaccines that have been administered are meant to recognize the spike from older versions of COVID. The Omicron variant could have 32 different spike mutations, which are all different from the ones our bodies have been trained to fight against. If the virus has mutated to have one of these spikes, then it will sneak past our bodily defenses completely undetected. Now, I should note that vaccines aren't completely ineffective, but right now experts are saying the best case scenario is that they're 40% less effective than they were. That's a massive drop, and considering that's the best case scenario, it could be even worse than 40%. Not only is Omicron better at disguising itself to our vaccines, but this is also made doubly worse because this variant is simply more infectious to begin with. Researchers have found that this variant is missing a membrane protein that the other COVID variants have had. Apparently, the absence of this membrane protein just inherently makes this version of COVID more infectious to humans to begin with. Therefore, this virus is more transmissible, more infectious, and harder for our bodies to fight against. This is why scientists and COVID researchers are really scared of this variant, and why the World Health Organization has labeled it a variant of concern. If it makes vaccines obsolete, then all of the progress that we've made over the past year seemingly goes down the drain, and it's as if we're starting back at square one again. Now I should state that nothing is concrete and we've only been aware of this variant for a very short time, so researchers won't know for sure how infectious this virus can be until at least a few weeks monitoring it in the real world. This also sadly leaves us in the dark about its fatality rate as well though. Simply looking at the numbers I provided earlier about having 261 million people infected and 5.2 million deaths, we can do some quick math and discern that the fatality rate worldwide of COVID up to this point is right around 2%. Now whether this variant of COVID will be more than 2% or less than 2%, that data once again won't be known for at least 6 weeks of its circulation. Only then will we be able to make an accurate assumption of its fatality rate. However, so far from the cases that are being monitored, the symptoms seem to be fairly mild, which is a good sign. The South African doctor Angelique Kotze, who first discovered this new variant, spoke to the BBC and has said that the symptoms are extremely mild. She went on to describe how it actually started with a male patient who's around the age of 33, and he said to me that he's just become extremely tired for the past few days and he's got these body aches and pains with a bit of a headache. She then goes on to say that the sore throat that this man had was also more of a scratchy throat, apparently less serious than some of the things we've seen with other variants. Her accounting of this situation has also been echoed by other South African doctors who've been treating people with this new variant. This is all very promising and could potentially mean that even though this variant is much more contagious, it's less deadly than the other ones that we've seen. I should also note that so far some classic COVID symptoms like the loss of taste or smell have not been reported with this variant. Once again, this is all very new and no expert claims to know the full implications this variant will have on fatality rates, but the milder symptoms are certainly welcome so far. The variant was only discovered a few days ago, but already many countries have taken action. The United States and Canada have already started to put travel restrictions on areas of southern Africa amid all of these new reports. Even though the bans are there though, that hasn't stopped Omicron from coming across the ocean. The first cases of the variant were found yesterday in Ontario and Ottawa. It was bound to happen, however people are concerned that it's already here. So far the United States has not recorded any cases of the variant, but experts believe that that's only a matter of time, and that all countries need to start preparing for the eventuality that Omicron will be a reality. All in all, the Omicron virus is so scary right now because it could take all of the work health experts have done and make it completely obsolete. If vaccines are obsolete, then this virus has the capability to push COVID numbers through the roof again. This will undoubtedly cause the hospitals to be far more overrun and more people to lose their jobs and their lives. We still have a lot to learn about this variant, and more news will be coming out in the future weeks about how serious this variant is and what we can do to prevent it. For right now, experts' advice remains the same. Get vaccinated if you haven't already, and if you're eligible to get a booster shot, then do that as well. Wear a mask whenever you're out in public and limit your exposure to other people as best as you can. It's more of the same, but right now that's the best thing we can do to keep us all safe and to keep us healthy.
What if the Omicron COVID variant was incurable? As we get closer to the second anniversary of the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic across the world, the biggest story on everybody's mind is the newest variant to be discovered by scientists in South Africa, officially named the Omicron variant because of the Greek naming system that also gave us the worrisome Delta variant earlier this year. Already thought to be spreading throughout both the United States and Europe, the Omicron variant contains over 30 mutations of its spike protein alone, which has the potential to make this variant of the virus much more easily spreadable than the previous variants. And while scientists are still working hard across the planet to figure out exactly what these mutations will mean for how we treat and prevent COVID in the coming months, what if the worst case scenario occurs and this specific variant is incurable? First of all, we'll have a bit of reassurance that a coronavirus strain without any cure is an incredibly unlikely scenario. With the mRNA technology used to create the existing COVID vaccines and our expanding understanding of how COVID works, any alterations that did have to be made to our current vaccines to more adequately protect against the surprising new strain could be relatively quickly made into a booster shot, at least compared to how long it took to get the original vaccines made in the first place. But what if the new strain seemed to completely ignore the vaccine's immunity and was not impacted by any of the treatments that are slowly being developed to fight back against COVID infections? Unfortunately, we would likely see further lockdowns and mask requirements as public health officials would want to slow down the spread of this incurable variant and buy scientists more time to figure out whether a cure or a way to further mitigate spread beyond just heavy mask usage. After nearly 2 years of lockdowns and public health measures, however, it would be difficult to communicate the importance of another lockdown when some parts of society are already furious at the lockdowns we've had so far. The importance of buying more time would need to be stressed, as scientists would need to know just how badly an incurable COVID strain would affect people of different age groups and just how severe the virus is expected to be once someone has caught it. All of these factors would influence just how strict of a lockdown or further rules would have to be put in place, but if the strain truly was incurable, eventually efforts would have to be made to figure out how to balance living in a regular society and ensuring that the virus wasn't wiping out our elderly or more at-risk populations. At the end of the day, everything in this video is just speculation based around the hypothetical of Omicron turning out to be an incredibly unique and incurable strain of the coronavirus. As of the recording of this video, scientists across the world are still figuring out exactly what's different with this strain compared to the COVID strains that our vaccines were originally designed against, and while early signs seem to show a higher infection rate with a lower severity of illness, and early reports from Pfizer claiming that their existing booster shot is showing promising results against the Omicron variant, the most important thing we can do right now is make sure that we're listening to what the experts are saying and keep doing everything we can to make society safer for all of us. From wearing masks when needed, to making sure we're all vaccinated and getting our booster shots to cut down on community spread.
Every year Santa travels all around the world, delivering gifts to all the boys and girls who have been good year-round, as a way to reward them for their efforts. The big man with the white beard and the red coat is an absolute staple for Christmas time, and it really wouldn't be the same without him. You've seen him in TV shows, cartoons, movies, even on Coke bottles, and sometimes if you're lucky, at the mall. Yet it seems this guy is always able to evade being caught at night when he's delivering presents. I'm not sure how he does it, but he's got to be a wizard of sorts. Between the flying reindeer, the fact that he's never seen, and considering how many cookies he could eat in one night, there's no way this guy is human. So odds are he's immune to the virus that has changed all of our lives dramatically. In fact, Dr. Anthony Fauci even explained that Santa has innate immunity to COVID, so he can still spread holiday cheer and deliver gifts in a safe manner. He won't be a super spreader, nor can he catch anything from anyone. But what if Fauci is wrong? Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we're asking, what if Santa caught COVID? As we got closer to the holiday season, and there were no signs of this thing slowing down, people started to get a little concerned with how this would affect Christmas. More specifically, many were wondering if Santa was going to be able to visit homes all over the world, as he does every year. Between the lockdown orders that some countries or cities have implemented, as well as the majority of the world asking people to maintain a distance from one another and try to limit contact with people outside of your household, well, it seems the idea of one man going from home to home all over the world is the last thing we want during our pandemic. However, when speaking with USA Today, Dr. Anthony Fauci explained, I quote, "Santa is exempt from this because Santa, of all the good qualities, has a lot of good innate immunity. Santa is not going to be spreading any infections to anybody." So for those of you watching, that should give you guys some peace of mind. This question is totally hypothetical, because as the Fauchmeister said, Santa isn't spreading anything to anyone. But it seems he may actually be wrong. I mean, kinda. Obviously when Fauci was talking about Santa, he was talking about the real deal. The guy from the North Pole that none of us have ever actually seen. But as previously mentioned, sometimes we see the mall Santas, which are just people trying to spread some holiday cheer by pretending to be the real deal. And it seems those who dress up as Santa definitely don't have the same innate immunity that the real man does. That's why there was actually a situation where Mr. and Mrs. Claus may have infected a bunch of people, which includes up to 50 children, without them even knowing they were carrying the virus. Every year in Ludowici, Georgia, the community gets together to celebrate Christmas by throwing an event which includes a parade, a tree lighting, and of course a photo opportunity with Mr. and Mrs. Claus. As is always the case, this year saw tons of locals come out, even with the pandemic, to celebrate the upcoming holidays. However, it then came to light that just days after the event, which took place on December 10th, both the actors who played Mr. and Mrs. Claus tested positive for COVID-19. To make matters worse, they interacted with an estimated 50 kids and potentially infected all of them as well. At the time of the event, the actors weren't shown any signs or symptoms of illness, so it's unclear when they were infected. However, this is a very scary situation. Even if only a handful of the kids were to get infected, they could then spread it to their entire home without even knowing. Robert Parker, chairman of the Long County Board of Commissioners, released a statement explaining, I quote, "On Thursday, December 10th, the Long County Chamber of Commerce held its annual Christmas parade in Ludowici. The event was followed by a tree lighting and an opportunity for children to visit with Santa and Mrs. Claus at the Old Well. The events were well attended and roughly 50 children had their picture taken with Santa." He then goes on to explain, I quote, "It has now been brought to the attention of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as my office, that after the event, both Santa and Mrs. Claus were tested for the COVID-19 virus, and both received positive test results. They were not displaying any symptoms at the time of the event. While this is cause for concern, I feel that it is important to note that exposures happen every day as we go about our day-to-day lives, often without any knowledge. Children are in close contact with both other children and adults daily at school, rec functions, and church. Proper CDC exposure guidelines should be followed if your child was exposed. However, I do not feel this incident is cause for panic. Now it seems, if anything, this is just damage control. Regardless of how you feel about the virus, if you found out dozens of people in your community, including up to 50 kids, were exposed, I wouldn't say that this is part of our day-to-day lives. And this is a great example of what could happen if we continue with these Santa photo ops. He went on to explain that both of his children even took photos with Santa and Mrs. Claus, but they haven't shown any symptoms since the event. Parker also explained how he's known both the actors for a while, and, I quote, "I can assure everyone that they would have never knowingly done anything to place any children in danger. They have both filled these roles for many years, and bringing joy to children during the holidays is one of the most important parts of their lives." I really hope the two people wouldn't knowingly dress up as Mr. and Mrs. Claus while sick and just play it off like everything is okay. And this isn't so much about blaming or pointing a finger at anyone as it is to get a point across. As we could clearly see, if up to 50 kids were infected, who knows how much worse things would be if the real Santa was able to get infected. Now the main difference, as I previously mentioned, is no one has ever seen the real guy in the flesh. Maybe you've seen his reindeer flying in the middle of the night sky, but no one has ever gotten close enough to legitimately touch or even sit with Santa. So odds are, even if he did have COVID and he delivered gifts, all you'd really need to do is maybe disinfect your gifts under the tree before playing with them, and hope that Santa was wearing a mask when he came down your chimney. However, the very scary reality of the situation is that it's possible Santa could be infected and not know it. The same way the two actors at this Georgia party tested positive just days after the event, who knows if they caught it prior to attending or afterward. Hopefully they caught it afterward, meaning none of the kids or those attending said event were at any risk from the two of them specifically. But that's what makes this virus so scary. You can be a carrier without even knowing. Now, where I do find some peace is knowing that those who are asymptomatic aren't the driving force of the spread. Meaning if Santa did test positive after Christmas but was asymptomatic, as scary as it is that he may have infected homes all over the world, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone in those homes would also get sick. Of course, it's also very possible that Santa does feel sick and decides for the first time in the history of the world that he isn't going to travel all over, delivering presents like he normally does. But I find that very hard to believe. This isn't the first pandemic that the world has seen. There was the 1918 flu, also referred to as the Spanish flu, the 1957 flu pandemic, swine flu which happened in 2009, the list goes on. And it seems Santa was able to make his trip all around the world every single year as well. So I don't see how this year, even given the pandemic, is any different. And aside from that, Fauci also claimed that Santa is pretty much immune from getting it, so there's even more reason not to worry, guys. Santa will be delivering all your PS5s this year. Just kidding, they're sold out. However, there is something else that I definitely want to highlight regarding this question. What happens if Fauci is wrong about Santa being immune? To no surprise, there are some who trust and believe everything the man says, and others who think he's completely incompetent. With all due respect, even President Trump seems to think Fauci isn't the best source to rely on for information regarding our pandemic, even though he has numerous accolades and is well respected in the scientific community. But if he were to claim that Santa can't get COVID, and then somehow, some way Santa did end up contracting it, well, what does that mean for the doc? For starters, it seems a lot of people would become less trusting of not only Fauci, but what he says and recommends we do. If he was wrong about Santa getting COVID, what else could he possibly be wrong about? This may actually lead to people all over the world having a more divided stance about how governments go about things, especially in the United States, if one of their top health officials was proven to be wrong about such an important factor. In this case, Santa being immune to COVID. Not saying Fauci would lose his job, but I think plenty of Americans would be much less likely to trust his every word. Now here's the good news. This video was a total hypothetical, so you don't need to worry about whether or not Santa is going to be spreading holiday cheer on Christmas. He'll be sure to visit each and every one of you to deliver a present or presents in a safe and COVID-free manner. And hopefully by this time next year, the pandemic is just going to be a thing of the past. We'll all be able to get back to our normal lives, seeing family and friends during the holiday season, and not have to worry about infecting one another. However, until then, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season this year. Stay safe, wash your hands, and try to do some good.
How many people are infected with COVID-19? Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more information. Outstanding, let's begin. We'll start at the beginning, in December of 2019, when coronavirus was first reported to the World Health Organization. At the time, it was described as a pneumonia of an unknown cause, found in Wuhan, China. By January 9th, the World Health Organization warned that about 50 cases of pneumonia in Wuhan could be connected to a coronavirus. A couple days later, the first coronavirus death was reported, a 61-year-old man from Wuhan who was admitted to the hospital in December. By January 21st, cases have been reported in Beijing, Shanghai, and even Thailand. The number of cases increased to 540 by the Chinese New Year, with 17 reported deaths. This led to the shutdown of public transport in Wuhan. As January ended, the outbreak was declared a public health emergency of international concern. Cases topped 5,300 and deaths had increased to 131. More than 15 other countries reported cases of the virus, but at this point there were no deaths outside of China. On February 5th, the Diamond Princess cruise ship began its 2-week quarantine after some of their passengers tested positive for the virus. This meant that 3,700 people would be held on board. 6 days later, the virus got an official name, COVID-19. Infections worldwide exceeded 42,000, with deaths reaching 1,000. This prompted the UN to activate a WHO crisis management team to stem the spread of the virus. By the time the leap day rolled through, global cases topped 80,000, with many countries like Iran and Japan implementing measures to keep the virus at bay. The risk of spread and impact of COVID-19 got upgraded to very high at a global level, which is the highest level of alarm. The WHO does say that containment is still possible though. The past few days leading up to the production of this video, the WHO has said that frontline health workers like nurses and doctors are ill-equipped to deal with COVID-19 and that industry must get their manufacturing quotients up by 40% in order to meet global demand. By March 5th, over 80 countries have had cases of COVID-19 and over 90,000 people have been infected, with 3,200 related deaths. The number of infections will likely increase to over 100,000 by the time this video is published, and deaths will possibly crawl towards 5,000. This may sound really dire, but do your best not to worry too much. Even though tens of thousands of people have been infected, about half the reported cases have ended in recovery. A large majority of the cases involve patients with mild symptoms in stable condition. It's worth noting that the average incubation period of COVID-19 is between 2 and 14 days, with some lasting longer than that. So it's likely that we will see some spikes thanks to previously unreported cases. However, it's important to keep a level head and do the easy everyday things you can do to prevent the spread. Wash your hands often, cover your coughs and sneezes, be courteous to those around you, and maybe avoid unnecessary world travel. While the numbers do look scary and quarantines sound grim, it's something we must remain calm about. Another thing to mention is that if you are a healthy, stable person, the virus's effect on you shouldn't be too calamitous. That being said, please keep an eye out for more vulnerable people who might be adversely affected by COVID-19. Help where you can, and if you can't be of service, assist people in finding the right kind of help. We'll make it through this. Let's just do our best to make it easier for everyone. Good luck out there.